Ryan Orwick here with STATMed Learning, talking about the multi-step teaching process we use in our STATMed Study Skills Class. One of the main questions students ask about the class is, can you tell me how the class is taught? The key here is that each skill is always taught, illustrated, and practiced using authentic med school material. Each skill is taught by itself in isolation using our 4-step process that goes like this. Step 1 is dissemination and instruction of each individual skill. We always start by laying out the name, definition, rationale, and role of the skill. We illustrate how it is used step by step in various situations, and we delineate rules and guidelines for best usage, and we highlight common mistakes and pitfalls. This might take 15 minutes, could take a few hours. It just depends on the nature of the skill being taught that day. After dissemination, we do step 2, guided practice. This is basically a mini workshop that we do right then, right there in class, immediately after disseminating the skill, sort of letting the students take it on an immediate test drive. Invariably, students are going to make mistakes, they're going to get confused, they're going to wipe out, and it's all by design because we're right there to fix it. This is a great way to boost the learning curve. Why? Because every time you try and complete a new skill and you get corrective feedback, you're doing what I call closing the circuit. We want you to have as many opportunities as possible to close that circuit for each new skill. That's what's going to accelerate your learning curve and get you further faster. Then we go to step 3, independent practice, which is a fancy word for homework. After class, we give you specific homework assignments where you will practice the new skill, often iterating multiple times. There are instances when you can select your own material for homework. Just talk to us about that if you're interested. But the good news is you can just let us make every assignment for you so you can focus on learning the skills, which will translate to you being able to apply these skills to any discipline for the rest of your career studying and learning medicine. So during this independent practice, guess what? You might mess up, you might get confused, you might do it wrong, wipe out. Again, it's all fair game. Making mistakes is a key part of in-depth learning, and that's a key part of our intent in the class. It's a safe place to experiment, to play around, to actually make mistakes with adding new skills. Students can always contact us in between class meetings that evening if they are stuck or they just power through it. Turning in the wrong homework is fine. The only way to quote unquote fail is to just give up and not do your work, and our students aren't going to do that. Finally, we close the circuit with step 4, analysis and feedback. When we meet for the next class, we unpack and we debrief on the homework. Lots of back and forth, feedback, and conversation happens here. And this is where the learning happens. Depending on the nature of the skill, we might run through a pre-designed breakdown of the assignment, or we might go through samples of each person's work and give feedback and talk about it, or we might lead a discussion about what we understand and what we don't understand, or how this skill might translate to a different discipline. This is always very dynamic and insightful, at least in my mind, because this is where the much desired aha moments happen. Then we repeat the process with the next skill the next day. As we progress through the class, we start to combine the skills using structured assignments, still closing various circuits, and at times multiple circuits, and providing feedback as we go. We can't always use the 4-step system for time management and test taking skills for obvious reasons, but keep in mind all of this is part of a very specific plan that's built into the very blueprint of the StatMed class. Towards the end of the class, students will build 2 models as part of their final assignments. The first is the post-StatMed study plan, which is a plan for how they're going to train with the new skills between the end of the class and going back to school or taking their test. You got to have a plan here, right? Makes sense. The other is what we call our final capstone. This is where they delineate, on the one hand, their old way of studying, and on the other hand, their new way of studying, which is a great tool for 2 reasons. The first is it creates a personalized tool that we can vet with each student to make sure they're on the right track. The second is a tool to prevent skill drift and regression, which is critical for future success after leaving the class. Finally, here are two things I always want to underscore to incoming StatMed class students. The first is this: don't treat the skills like a buffet where you get to pick and choose the skills you want. Just don't do it. So you're better off just mastering each skill as they come. I have all kinds of cautionary horror stories about people trying to pick and choose, so just trust me on this one. And the other is this: you're going to be very worried about the time cost of each skill we learn, wondering how on earth can I utilize this back in school or if I'm prepping for a test under rigid time demands. Let me tell you, I hear you, and it's my concern as well. But learning new in-depth skills is tough, and we have to teach you how to execute them working step by step by step. We have to learn to crawl before we learn to walk, before we learn to run, before we learn how to execute these skills in the run of play under time pressure. I get this, and I promise you, using our 4-step process along with everything else we teach you along the way, we will get you there. It's a normal concern, so I'm just planting this seed early and proactively. So hopefully this helps illustrate how the class is structured. I know it is a lot to wrap your head around, and it might be hard to understand how in-depth we can teach these study methods, but let me tell you, methods matter, and we are really, really good at teaching these methods. So if you have questions, please write them down and set up an interview. I'm always happy to listen to your story and answer whatever questions you have about how the class might help you unlock your potential and help you meet your goals in med school, on your boards, or in related fields. Thanks for watching. I hope to hear from you soon.